You're listening to CoinDesk's Money Reimagined with Michael Casey and Sheila Warren.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Money Reimagined. This is the Money Reimagined edition that is 1 week after the circus, the legendary event, the madness, the joy, the whatever you want to call it, Sheila, consensus. Have you recovered?
No.
I don't think my voice, I think, is probably still telling you that no, I'm still wearing the effects at this stage. How about you?
Yeah, I would say I have not recovered. But I think I have not recovered from like the past month, which culminated in one of the busiest weeks of the crypto year, which is, for reasons that always escape me, is in Austin at a hot time. We got better weather than usual.
Reasons for that, but that's, but yes, we can't.
Well, it's what it is. So added to all of the sort of stress and running around and everything else, there's just the sort of heat factor and the mugginess factor. Again, better weather than usual, but
that's why I love the scooters. I'm the scooter guy. I'll be even if I'm having to wear a blazer, which I sometimes am. I'm cruising through, and people are waving at me because I am. Here's one thing that's very weird for me personally. So we did agree that today is going to be a little bit of a personal, like getting a bit raw, talking about what it is to do this in the public sphere, and the weirdest thing for me about going to Consensus is that suddenly I'm a little bit of a celebrity. Everybody seems to know me, and I'm being greeted by everyone because I am the chairman of Consensus. I'm on stage, and people have known me over the years, and so it's kind of weird. It's like I have a lot of it. So when I get on, I like getting around the scooters, and so now I'm just like the public figure scooting around on the scooters.
I would say it's not suddenly, Michael. I would contest the suddenly, but yes, I mean Consensus.
Well, it's only really manifested this concentrated way for 3 days in Austin in next year in Toronto. But it was great. I mean, yes, it was ridiculously, you could say well or badly timed. As journalists, I think we'll happily say well timed. The news cycle helped us significantly. I'm sure it did drive ticket sales and attendees, which is great. But I think just as importantly for us in the content game, it gave us something to talk about. It was we had a lot going on. The ultimate moment, I think, of the news cycle playing into our hands was, of course, the fact that we'd had quite a bit of discussion about Trump because we'd had a debate earlier in the day with Ryan Selkis and Marvin Amory on whether or not that crypto should be all in on with Trump on the single issue concept or being more bipartisan. And then Trump gets convicted of 34 felonies, and we were just about to go on stage with none other than Bobby Kennedy Jr. that I was interviewing him on stage, and Kennedy had a press gaggle, right? A press conference,
of course,
immediately after this. And I think he was just on the spot because he hadn't had a chance to think about it. So they asked there, like, what do you make of the felony, the conviction? And RFK Jr. said, I think it's wise for me not to say anything. And we're like, all right. So backstage, we're like, we've got to get him to say something. He really does, because this is crazy. He can't not be front. So we were scheming backstage. When he gets here, we're going to show him, you can't just do this. I'm going to ask you the question and you're going to have to respond to it because you're going to look bad if you don't, right? So this is some sausage making about the way these things work. You talk these through things with your subject and get through it all. And anyway, he said, no, I just needed some time. Now I've got something to say. It's like, great. So I got on stage. And so that really made that there was something to really drive home the attention and so forth. But I'll say this much, because we were talking before, Sheila, about this, and I think I felt under a lot more pressure than I've felt for a long time as a journalist in that environment. Like, there's something different on two levels about that format for pressing hard on questioning somebody about their positions when they are a presidential candidate, which is about as high a bar as is required for asking tough questions. Those are the people you have to ask tough questions of. Is that doing so is a lot easier when it's just you on a telephone or face-to-face or even in a TV studio. But when you're sitting on a stage filled with RFK supporters who think that you have him on stage purposefully for the reason of lifting him up and giving him an opportunity, and the fact that it's a conference, not really a press environment where you are allowed and you're supposed to give your interviewee some room to run with their answers and so forth. I felt like I had this huge obligation on my shoulders to journalists to pick up that story and make sure that we were pushing back, but at the same time, knowing that I had these eyeballs on me and everything else. And so I don't know. I don't know whether I did a good enough job. But I was, I think people seem to think it was fine. But when he came out and said his answer to the question was, I think that it proves that the Democrats are politicizing the judiciary. I had to push back and just say, well, I didn't quite use these words, but I said, you just effectively threw 12 of your peers, the jurors, under the bus. Are you saying that they were politicized, that somehow, and this is a process that has, both the defense and the prosecution, how this jury selection process works. It's an equal opportunity to do this. These are representatives of your fellow Americans that you're now saying are politicized. And he started to say, oh, well, no. What I really meant was that the prosecution and the agencies, the DOJ has been politicized. But this was a New York AG. This was a New York case. And so this is like these multiple levels removed of the, so, and this is the thing about RFK, right? I like what he says about regulatory capture and the revolving door of corporate interests inside the agencies. I think it's absolutely fair to say that the FDA and other institutions do get captured. We certainly know this from looking at the way that the Federal Reserve has been structured and the FDIC and all the financial agencies are typically have a huge presence of Wall Street banks. And I do think that creates an enormous conflict that is a big problem in Washington. So I'm all for having that conversation about it. But what I find problematic is that that you have to go all the way into these absurd conspiracies to then draw your conclusion as to what's going on, or to use that as an excuse to say, and therefore, Biden is politicizing the judiciary. It's like, how actually is he doing that? And you know what I'm saying? Why do we have to buy? And then at the same time, I think the FDA and I think there's some interesting points about vaccines, but he just keeps going all the way down to sort of these sort of very big conclusions and ignores the fact that the vaccines are by definition a public health solution, not an individual one, right? That's what they're there. They're to like protect the group, not the individual. And so you're coming at it from the right. And I suppose what I'm trying to get at here is like, this industry is doesn't ask those sensible, tough questions of what these theories are. It overly and too comfortably absorbs the idea that there is some sort of like a grand conspiracy. There is the swamp is controlling everything, and that's why the real truth is being hidden from you. And this real truth is it's flimsy. It's a very flimsy. These conspiracy theories are actually pretty flimsy, and I think there's something quite problematic for crypto as in this political moment as well, that it jumps into bed with these kind of tinfoil hat ideas. It really is.
What I tweeted right before Consensus, I said I literally found an image of a tinfoil cowboy hat, and I tweeted, I guess we all better show up something like wearing these now or whatnot, right? Because look, in a time of truthiness, it is extraordinarily challenging to be a person of substance, let alone nuance, because people don't want to hear. They want to play things out to the craziest end possible and say, if these sort of tiny questions are appropriate about judicial system, jury process, whatever it is, the conclusion must be that the entire enterprise is somehow fundamentally corrupt, which is absolutely crazy. And let us reject that sentiment out of hand, because it is almost never true. But that is kind of the environment, right? It's like the slippery slope starts with even a single question about anything. And the second you express any sort of question about something, you're sucked into like down this sort of spiral or wormhole into like, well, the whole institution is crazy. The whole thing makes no sense. The whole thing is just an absolute, disaster. And someone is pulling strings at everyone else's expense, right? Now, I think when it comes to things like jury processes, et cetera, here's where I'm not a journalist, but I am a lawyer. And no, that's not a thing. There are ways of buying off juries. It's called jury tampering. It's a thing that does happen. It's happened in the past. The mob did it all the time, probably still does for all I know. But that is not what happened here. There was no jury
I do
tampering
not
here.
think
Because
that the
we're on,
Democratic Party was buying off that jury. That doesn't seem
not
like
a thing. Not a thing.
By the way, if anybody is going to have a powerful defense team, it is a person as well-funded as Donald Trump is.
Look, we have people on this show all the time, and we question their assumptions all the time. But as you note, and I'm very proud of the fact that we do that. We've heard quite a bit of nonsense on the show. We've sometimes, occasionally, when we're together, in person, we kind of laugh a little bit over a drink about some of the more colorful characters we've had on, right? And some of our chats, our side chats, are quite legendary at this point. But regardless, I think it is very different when you're in a room where everybody there is, the feeling of the room is very supportive of the person that you're interviewing, and holding them to account is a very challenging thing to do. I also think there's an element of just being completely on the spot with it, where that everyone there is going to have an emotional reaction to the questions you're asking, or to the responses rather, right? But the way you're framing the question is going to be taken personally by some folks there. So, I don't think this was ever I don't want to say this was an issue at Consensus, but there's a fundamental safety concern about that too, right? Some of these people are absolutely nuts. And again, I think I perceive zero security questions or whatnot at Consensus, but it's always kind of in the back of your mind, in situations like that. And I've had that experience as well myself. I think, I will say there have been previous consensuses where I don't know, where there's like always a policy stage, and that stage was pretty bereft, because I'm usually
we had a policy summit. We had a this one was
it was I mean, I did 2 sessions I think there, and they were both just it was full room, because of the timing of the question and how it's top of everyone's mind, right? Like, how is the presidential election affecting crypto, and vice versa? How is the crypto industry affecting the presidential, if at all? So, it was interesting to see that depending on the time in the cycle, to your point, policy was the topic du jour the entire week. And everybody was very, very interested in hearing from not just folks like Bobby Kennedy Jr., but also just I would say actual experts on crypto, which he does not claim to be, and also is not, but to hear from those folks about what's the lay of the land and how should we think about how this is going to play out over the course of the next few months, going into the lame duck period and going into an inauguration. And of course, the question on everybody's mind is like, well, if Trump loses, as based on the vote counts that come in November, is he going to concede? Probably not, right? And if he wins, is it going to be by a margin such that there won't be a contest happening? And will we even have finality on this election in time for something like a lame duck to be meaningful if we don't know, what the outcome is?
With a convicted felon in the midst and the possibility of jail time, this is unprecedented. And it's just, so that was it was exciting on one level to be able to be embracing all this stuff right in real time as that unprecedented news was developing. I mean, and then of course on the last night, we still got news because Biden vetoed the repeal of SAB 121, which,
never stops, Michael.
The fun never stops.
Which means
I don't know. I heard from one of my reporters one reporter that there's some theory out there that in fact the SEC is going to wind it back on their own because they had to give Biden the chance to actually, carry out his threat to veto and couldn't have him go back on his word. Does seem like, as somebody put it, just the stupidest hill for him to die on.
What I said about that publicly was, I reframed my team has heard me say this all the time, which is, shutting the F up is usually very high ROI, because last I checked, it's free. Silence is free. But what I said publicly was, silence is golden, because walking things back when you've taken positions can be it's very expensive. Sometimes you can't do it, right? Sometimes the cost is too high. And in this case, we do have pretty strong confirmation that the White House, the Biden administration, of course, the SEC is an agency that's part of that. The SEC's positions on this were very clear, but the Biden White House, really did not realize what a firestorm they were walking into with his veto threat, let alone expecting let's just call it a defection of so many very senior Democrats around that topic, let alone having to then decide, do they, fold to that pressure, or do they stay with the course of what they were going to do? And, I was one who was not in the slightest bit surprised that the veto happened. Once you say you're going to veto something like that, you're almost certainly going to follow through with it. The decision is before you make the statement about your intention and what you're going to do, right? So I didn't see a world in which he could not veto it. But it was interesting, it was interesting. Look, I'll say a couple things about this because I think they merit this discussion. Like, very interesting to see. There's this concept, if anyone's watched The West Wing, right, of like dumping things out with the trash, right? You kind of like dump something into a slow news cycle. You don't want a lot of attention around it. You're trying to you got to do it, but you're trying to kind of get it. And so the Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, news dump was when this thing came down. But of course, the comedy there is that like, that's when everybody on crypto goes back on Twitter, right? Everyone's like, let's whatever. They're like checking, they're scrolling.
There's no dead period.
It's a sickness.
I wonder whether consensus itself was considered a factor, right? Like whether or not they did it outside of the conference,
I mean, who knows, right? But I think doing it Monday morning would have been worse. Then they have a week of having to answer for it. At least at the Friday night, they had the weekend. Right. This isn't the kind of thing it's going to hit the Sundays, right? Or anything like that, because there's so many other things to talk about.
No, there's a few other issues out there at the moment.
Yeah. Something about, in the same week as the convictions was, I think, the most savvy move. But the move itself is it's a colossal mistake. It's not a good decision. And here we are. But yeah, all the conspiracy theory around this, like, oh, Biden's he's gonna absolutely fold. I'm like, that's not a thing. Like, nobody who knows how this works was surprised in the slightest. But of course, crypto Twitter erupts and everyone's like, this is it for us. Last straw. He's lost us forever. Blah, blah, blah. And you're like, he'd already lost you. If that's how you're thinking, I think you already had your candidate selected.
No, it's not. Look, but I think I think it was interesting to have, as I put it, a tripartisan representation at Consensus, because we did have Tom Emmer, who of course is doing a real victory lap at the moment, the successes he's had in the House, and very much of carrying Trump's water in the process.
Well, also, but I think it's important to note though that he has been a strong advocate, including on multiple stages in Texas and Consensus for bipartisanship. He gave a very impassioned speech about bipartisanship and how crucial it is. So, which I very much appreciated for obvious reasons.
He's quite a balanced man in general, right? But I think like any senior Republican, he knows he has to also get on the Trump wagon.
He's a professional politician, so he, he's not he's not there for the optics of it. He's there for other reasons as a professional politician. So.
I was quietly pleased he did do the little plug of my book on stage, which I find always a joy. Some people can either blame me or celebrate my role in this little thing that he read. He read my book.
Tripartisan.
That was his moment that led him to do. So that was my little okay. But then we had Ron Wyden, who on the Democrat, a very respected Democrat on the other side. So quite an array of political perspectives. And I think, I was also very pleased with the debate between Ryan and Marvin that we kind of cobbled together when things were getting far more politicized and realized that we had to have somebody who would be up there to offer an alternative perspective than Ryan Selkis on. So basically that was, Ryan of the view that single issue voting is what matters now for crypto people. So be damned about whatever other policies there are. Go with whoever it is that you think can most effectively blatantly drive through crypto interest, and it, in his mind happens to be Trump, and so that's it. Trump all the way. Forget everything else about the man. I tend to be perennially baffled as to why crypto people would associate the authoritarian instincts of a man like Trump with the ethos of an open access, pro-human rights kind of vision that I think crypto stands for. But that's what it is, and it's a take on how to be very supposedly effective in what you're doing. And then having Marvin Amory, who is chief legal counsel, or is he his policy officer? I'm not sure his title.
He's both, I believe.
Okay, but for Uniswap,
more crucially, he's a long-standing Democratic supporter, booster, and policy guy. Yeah,
right. And his take being really that if you do that, if you politicize crypto, then you lose the capacity for crypto to do what it really wants to do, which is to build its own independent power base, to be a technology or an industry that has its own position on things, and that you can, that's what you recognize, that not as sort of some Republican cause, right? I don't think, and I don't know. I mean, no longer for. I mean, I tend to think that's the right way to go. I don't.
Yeah, well, obviously, I think that's the right way to go. But I think it's interesting. I'm hearkening back to when I was asked point blank on live national television on Bloomberg Crypto, like a week ago. I don't know what time has no meaning. A week ago, 10 days ago, whatever it was, before the conviction. I know that. But the question was, who's better for crypto, Trump or Biden, right?
Mm.
And you know, you have to be on your, to your point, you got to be completely on your toes. This is blasting out to millions of Americans live, right? So what do you say? And look, I responded what I think is the honest answer, and I think we can own this, which is to say, it depends on the frame you take on the conversation. If you look at the very narrow frame of who has said nicer things about crypto, it is unequivocally Trump, of course. And I think I don't have no problem saying that because it is factually correct. Trump has said words like crypto, those guys are great. They're building great stuff. You know, at that time, that's what he had said. It's about all he had said. This is right after the kind of Friday Mar-a-Lago thing.
Perfect.
Now he said more words, but at the time, that's really all he'd said. How much stock you choose to put into that is your decision based on the historical record of Trump. I didn't put a ton of stock into it, but you know, others made their own choices about that, right? And I do think it's fair to say that subsequently he has evinced a slightly more understanding of what the heck crypto actually is. You know, there it is. Whereas Biden has actually taken steps that have been, you know, hostile is a very strong word, but they certainly have not been supportive of the proposition of crypto or digital assets for that matter. So, you know, which is a position that's changed since 22. So there's been some, you know, I think weakening of the position of strength I think we had, or I felt from the administration in 22. Now, that's the narrowest possible frame. And the follow-up question was like, what frame do you take, Sheila? I said, I take the broadest frame. And I think that things like national security, I think things like the rule of law, you know, I think those things are really important. I think having somebody in the office of the most powerful office in the world, which I still think is the presidency of the United States, having somebody there who is reliable and credible and honest, I think that matters, right? I didn't say all this because, you know, you don't come up with it at the time. But on Laura Shin, when I went on a podcast later, I said something like, you know, you can get all these like specific laws that favor something, but if there's no rule of law, does any of that even matter? Like, does any of that matter? Like, what is the deck of cards you're playing with? And if the deck is rigged, then you might get the best card in the deck, but you're not playing the game you think you're playing. So what is the point of any of it? You know, so that's the frame I take on this. But I think, and I think, you know, then people will go into the debate like, oh, well, if it was another, you know, Republican or Democrat or whatever, and those are all irrelevant because that's not who we have. The candidates we have are the candidates that we have. And people are entering this race who are very random, who may be even more, you know, pro crypto. And I find that interesting, right? Like if you had somebody who decided to throw their hat in the ring for president and it was like, I'm running on a platform of crypto-ness and cryptocracy, and that's what I want, I don't think that person would pull votes. So I think there is a fundamental hypocrisy into this, like, well, I'm going to vote for the most pro-crypto candidate, because I don't think that that is true. I think that people are always hedging. They're always trying to figure out what is the best move they can make. What are the things they care about? How do they prioritize? And I think that the time of judgment around that question, it's very difficult. Like, I think there's this sense right now that I certainly felt, I will be honest with you, one of the days of consensus, I was quite down, and then I kind of got it back the next day. But one day it really did feel like, if you aren't pro-Trump, you aren't pro-crypto. And I find that position and I know you do as well, I find that position very challenging. I think that
lots and lots of people who are not. And that always makes me feel like, I mean, I think this is the other thing that I and we've had this conversation numerous times. I think it's just something that's worth always reminding people. Crypto is not monolithic. It is a diverse community. This is one of the reasons why Consensus is really, I think, obviously I'm biased, but I do think it is the best event of the lot, because we deliberately build I call it the gathering of the tribes, right? It's a multifaceted, it has every stakeholder, it has all the competing protocols, it has lawyers and politicians, and it also has entrepreneurs and business people, and it has the full range of perspectives of people who are right into building solutions for ESG, and others who are like, don't you dare touch my, you know, Bitcoin mining stack or whatever. It's a variety, and that's the way it should be, because it is actually a technology that affects the breadth of the economy. And I think this is where the real problem with the single issue approach, right? So to me, that's something that a community does, right? So a community is a sort of a common interest kind of, so you know, Black voters have traditionally voted for Democrats, and you know, and the sort of community-driven, culture-driven politicking is an integral part of American politics. And you see it like, I've got to make sure we reach out to this group and that group and that group. But they're groups of people as opposed to a technology, right? Or an industry. And that's a really important difference. Technology is supposed to be politically neutral, right? And crypto should be politically neutral. But the minute that we say, are you with crypto or are you out? Then you're sort of like, you're putting a lot of this, it's my community and I'm fighting for my rights as I don't know, a Jewish person or a black person or, a gay person or whatever.
Which identity do you prioritize? Which community do you put first?
Exactly, because it's multifaceted. We are multifaceted. I mean, like Trump has said something about crypto. That doesn't mean that crypto, so what is crypto? And you say this, it's like it just says this is crypto acting like something. This is when, and this is, I think, what has enabled Elizabeth Warren to do what she's able to do, because she's anthropomorphized the whole thing as if it's a monolithic. This is crypto. It's a community, and they want some selfish thing of their own, and it's not. It's a multifaceted, multi-interested group of people who happen to believe that this technology is extremely productive and has a lot of capabilities behind it.
Yeah, and look, the great irony here is this. I mean, I've talked about this so many times on our show, but what I find so compelling about blockchain technology, about digital assets, about crypto, about tokens, is this idea of micro communities, and the idea that it actually is an empowering technology that enables micro communities to spin up and spin down and have traction within their own universe. And the idea that you want the biggest tent possible with as many people feeling like they want to be engaged as possible is important. And look, here's what I find the fundamental, and I've also talked a lot on our show about how I view crypto, the industry, as just having own goals. Like, it's just own goal city, right? Like, we think we're winning and actually we're just kicking the ball into our own goal. And that is also true, I think, of some of the politicians here. I think that, this SAB 121 veto, CRA veto, is an example of an own goal. It's not accomplishing anything. Like, Biden in his statement said, we want safety and this and that and soundness and whatever it is. And I'm like, well, this would be a way to move that ball down the field. And by vetoing this, you're actually accomplishing the exact opposite of your stated goal, which is the definition of, again, an own goal.
An own goal.
The industry is just rife with these. Okay. And I actually have like a friend in crypto that I text every time I'm like, own goal. It's just like, there's so many of them that just come through. It's wild. So, what are you trying to do? But I think it's really about recognizing that there's alienation happening from normal people, okay, by some of this rhetoric slipping into the mainstream. The idea that anybody who votes for Trump is suddenly going to then attach it to crypto and be like, oh, well, now I support crypto because I support Trump. Like, people who are inclined to support Trump pre any of this sort of crypto engagement, they're not paying attention to crypto. They are, going to go in that direction. And people that are not inclined to be that way are now looking at crypto, and it's getting harder and harder to hold the line that this is a nonpartisan opportunity. And so what I don't want to see is this world in which, people that are engaging with this asset class become more and more right wing, and we're alienating the bulk of the people in certainly the United States who are either centrist, which most Americans are. Most Americans actually pick their issue and vote for a candidate. And they vote like independents, whether or not at this point in time, right? This is what all polling shows, is more Americans vote like independents, like party affiliates. Those who are diehard party affiliates are feeling alienated by this. So we're actually doing a series, at the Crypto Council, where we're bringing on Democrats who've been relatively long-time supporters of crypto, or even new people, right? And kind of just giving them 15 minutes to say, why is this compelling to you? Why do you care about it? Because there's a sincerity there. And this idea that people are just pandering to the money, that's not really true. It's that for years we've been making the case. And now, yes, there is a stick and a carrot, but they need a reason to be on side with, the opportunity, and they have one. And so they're kind of like, all right, all things being equal, I'm going to err on the side of keeping this technology on shore, trying to make it safer, pulling it within the regulatory perimeter so that I can have some influence over it. Now, whatever it is, right? They're kind of like choosing to say, we would like to keep this here versus sending it where we have zero ability to have anything to do with, what happens to it, right? So all of that is by way of saying, it is the first thing I said on our show today, is in a time of truthiness, it is very tough to be a person of substance, let alone nuance. It is very challenging. And you and I will own myself in this as well, are both people who love nuance and live in nuance and ask a lot of questions and form our own opinions. And, I wish I could say that I'm seeing more of that in certain spaces, but I like to think that it will ease, and the sort of time of emotional volatility will ease, and we'll get back to a more logic-based approach to things. But
I like to think so. Yes, I like to think.
Dream.
Let us just live on. Look, there's always hope, right? That's the thing, right?
Yes.
All right. On that note, why don't we wind this up? We will probably have one more go at this all-important, all-encompassing political story next week, and then after that, finished, done, over, no more. Right? We're going to
let's move on.
Let's move on and talk about other things. But I think we have one more go at it. We'll see how it goes. So, on that note, thank you all for joining us for this post-consensus wrap-up. Sheila and myself, we will back, we think, with a guest next week. Thank you again to Michele Musso for all of her wonderful work behind the scenes, producing this show. Make sure that you keep listening to us, give us your feedback, follow us, share the good news with other people, and thanks for being a listener. Bye.